And there we go. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our next installment of the MichCDA Career Cafe. I'm the president of MichCDA, April Kalkowski, and today we are going to have a great discussion about how to support our Latinx students and clients in their career development. As a reminder, please keep yourself muted, and the session is being recorded, so you may choose to turn off your video if you wish. And we will be monitoring the chat the entire time, and we'll offer time for questions at 11:30, possibly before then. We'll just see how it goes, right? So I'm going to turn it over right now to Laura Wise, our president-elect and our communications committee board member. So take it away, Laura.
Well, thank you so much, April. And I will go ahead and share my screen now so we can formally begin. If you could give me the host privileges, please.
Sorry.
No problem. And thanks again, everybody, for coming today. Okay. Well, again, thank you all for joining us. Doing this Career Cafe has been really fantastic. We've had some great presentations. All of the previous ones you can find on our website there as well. We've been keeping the recordings and all of the resources there, so definitely encourage you to check those out. I want to recognize our board members who are here on the call. I noticed that our treasurer, Michelle Burdick, is here, and also Tristan Layfield, who is our private practice representative. And another plug, our MichCDA newsletter went out this week, and he had some great tips about working on your private practice. So I'm full of the plugs today. Love being a part of the organization. And we have a lot to offer, including our conference that's coming up next month as well. So without further ado, Luis Garcia was going to be joining us today as well, but he got called up by the MSU president and is unable to join us. But I'm very, very excited to have Samantha Velez. She is the Associate Director of National Migrant Scholars Internship, or the NMSI initiative. So very happy for her to be here with us. We've had great conversations even just leading up to this. So welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Laura.
And just to give you a brief outline of what you can expect during our time together, we'll be giving a little information, background on the marketplace, student-client composition, how we can best support students, which a lot of that is applicable to general clients. We'll talk a bit about culture and also the changing landscape. And actually, as you know, we like to make this interactive. When I'm sharing, unfortunately, I can't see the chat. So if we don't catch your questions during the presentation, definitely we will get to those at the end. So we thought it would be best, I'm going to turn it over to Sam to get us started with just the setting the stage in terms of making sure we have common understanding of the terminology that we're talking about today.
Thank you, Laura. So yeah, just quickly, there are a lot of terms that have been kind of created or are in place to generalize the Latino Hispanic population. And we thought it important to kind of just briefly go over what they are. And we'll leave this here. We're not going to go into detail in specifics, but the term, one thing that I do want to cover is the term Latinx is a gender neutral term and has recently been, it was created to kind of just be inclusive of everyone in the Latino Hispanic community. One thing that I do want to add is that Spanish is a gendered language. So many times Latino is used to encompass Latinas and Latinos, so women, females, and males. They are used, cohesively. Hispanic is a Latino many times, and vice versa. We know that the Census Bureau has kind of just compacted both of these terms together in one, but you can see this very simple general terms, and I know that there's a resource page at the end of this where you can find more information on the terms.
Thank you. So as we like to start with the Career Cafe, giving you some information, some overview about the population that we want to support. So there's many reasons why it's important to support everyone within the marketplace. Sometimes people feel they may be more interested from the human perspective in terms of supporting the individual and wanting the absolute best success for them as an individual. And some people, sometimes it's can be a compelling argument from the economic side as well. And so we definitely want to explore both sides of that. And so we found in preparing for the presentation, just the incredible buying power that this population will be contributing to the economy, 1.9 trillion in 2023. Giving an overview of the marketplace, 75% of all US labor force growth over the last 6 years, as recent as 2019, was among the Latinx population. The median age is young, and so this is why the engagement is so important, especially starting even earlier. But we're definitely in a place that through the work that we're doing to really make a difference. And the projected growth by 2060 is nearly 30%, and the Latinx population accounts for 18.5%. Giving you more information about those in the workplace, Hispanic or Latinos have the most of less than a high school diploma among the populations, and you can see here. And then for Hispanic or Latinos, they earn less than any other major race. And so again, we know that really helping our clients and our students to learn about their advocacy, but also our advocacy with employers and with recruiters. This is why the conversation is so important, looking at the individual, us as practitioners and as supporters, whether that is in the K-12 space, private practice, higher education, or even on the employer side. It's all linked and very important. And then just rounding out the information on the demographics or the statistics, Hispanic and Latinos hold less management occupations than any other ethnicity. 3% of executive management while representing 17% of the workforce. And so there's a significant disparity there. And of the Fortune 500 board seats, only 3.8% are of Hispanic Latino background. And I wanted to turn it over to Sam for her thoughts, and this leads very well into talking about more of the individual.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, and as you noted, that we see a correlation between education and educational attainment and where the community is falling under the employment or occupation, right? We have a lot in the service industry and even in the production and transportation, in the natural resources, going back to the farm workers, which is who we cater to, right? Students, that have that agriculture and farm worker background. And as you noted, it's extremely important as we see that there's 3% of the executive management or a representation of 3%. However, the community, Latinos and Hispanic, make up 17% of the workforce. So going back to the representation, and even with the Fortune 500 board seats, I mean, there's something that's happening, and we're here to create that change, right? To make sure that we're servicing the students to prepare them to be at that next level. One of the things that we do and what I specifically cater to is internships and making sure that the students are geared and ready to participate in that. And just picking up where you left off, Laura, we know that Hispanics represent nearly 14% of the interns, although that's a little closer to the percentage of what the workforce amount or encompass. At 17%, we still know that there's a small discrepancy. And as we know, nearly half of all internships are non-paid. So we can go over to the next slide, Laura. And as I kind of just transition into the student client composition, one of the things that we do, and I didn't know at the beginning when we introduced, is that my job is to, one, connect the students to internships, and the other is to work with employers and make sure that a bridge is being connected. And the other is to make sure that they're being compensated accordingly. So if they can't take on unpaid experiences, our program have the funds available to offset that cost. Which goes back to, again, the population that we're serving. So we know that our students are more likely, almost all of them are first generation college students. We know that they're coming from low economic or low income backgrounds. 99% of the students that we work with are identify as Latino, Latina, or Hispanic. We also, the one commonality of the students that we serve is they all have experience in the farm worker and agriculture background, which also goes back to the data, right? We know that Latinos are entering the workforce at a very, very early age. So by the time that the students that we're servicing come onto the college or university setting, they already have a loads of experience in the service and farm work and agriculture industry. And we really try to, and that's what we're doing, right? We really try to cater to that and their experiences as first gen, their experiences in the workforce and whatnot. But as this kind of, as we're looking at the numbers and we're looking at the student composition, it kind of even equates to there, where the students are increasingly Latinos as a whole, a vital part of the United States economy, as you mentioned, Laura. So really where we're doing a wonderful work and to make sure that our students are being prepared. We can head over to the next slide. And Laura, let's talk, Laura.
April, are there any questions in the chat right now? When I'm sharing, unfortunately, I can't see the chat.
Not at this time.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, again, feel free, if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We can ask them on the spot or at least have them ready at the end of the presentation. But I wonder, Sam, did you want to give a little more information about the population that you specifically are working with? Because we gave the kind of the overall marketplace, the overall statistics in the workforce. But just so if folks aren't familiar with your program.
Yeah, totally. Thank you, Laura. So we work specifically with students that have been a part of the College Assistance Migrant Program. We do have a national platform, CAMP. There's roughly 50 plus universities and colleges that have a CAMP program. CAMP is federally funded through the Department of Education, and it's a 1 year's support service program to support students that have that farm worker and agriculture background. And the goal of CAMP is to kind of see them through the first year and guide them so that they are successfully complete their first year. And again, this goes back to the retainment, the support that is needed for first gen students. My job and responsibility is to work with all CAMP programs nationwide and provide that direct service to the students. A lot of the work is conducted virtually and going, obviously because of COVID, we haven't had an opportunity to do much of the in-person support. However, that's the student composition of what we're supporting, of who we're supporting. I'm sorry, the students, so they enter the college and university setting, and we service students of all majors, of all ages, obviously higher ed, but that's a gist of who we're serving.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that although you've working with the population, which is quite large within itself, as you mentioned, being national, but in preparing for this with you, I really love that while you know, your experience, this isn't unique only to the camp students. And so I'm excited for you to share what you kind of shared with me in terms of what you've learned regarding the development of a student, which really applies to the client. And I believe your program too are also considered, quite a few are also considered non-traditional, so may actually be older than the average, college student. But and your so yes, if you wanted to give more information about your perspective on that.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Laura. And yes, although we do service a very specific group of students, we know that all of them have, there's a correlation between the student population that we're serving and the Latino population in the workforce. That there is a direct correlation. I mean, they match almost exactly. And as we noted earlier, about roughly 99% of our students identify as Hispanic and Latino. So we do a lot in support of them. And one of the biggest things that we're doing is that, and going back to the first gen, is that we go down to the basic needs of the student. Okay, we look to see that they have housing, they have food on the table, and this is a similar to a career office, right? But our support begins at that basic level, and we have come to find that if our students do not have the basic necessities, then they cannot move on to build rapport. They cannot do a lot of the things that your average or typical student should be able to do. So one, we start at the basic needs. Another thing that we're doing is, after we kind of make sure that everyone has what they need in order to be okay, we never expect the student to come directly to us. And I think this is extremely important. And y'all can hear my puppy. I threw him out of my room. He's knocking. Please excuse me. But going back to what I was saying, we never expect the student to come to us. Our work is to get the information to the student. And I think that's a little bit different as to, we see a lot of offices on campus doing something similar, but our outreach is directly to the student and bringing information to them. We never assume or have the expectation, just to reiterate again, that the student will come directly to us. Okay, and that goes back to being first gen and being able to navigate the campus. So
And
go to the student. Yes.
yeah, and like you were talking about, that sometimes there is a lack of trust, kind of leading into that first point about rapport. And just as we see, there might not be a strong representation out in the workforce if there isn't necessarily also representation among those who are delivering the services. That's all the more reason why this rapport piece is so important.
Absolutely, Laura. And that goes back to how our program even came to be, as I had noted earlier, right? That we were finding that our students were not going to the career center or the career office. MSU has an outstanding career network, and our students were missing out. And we sat down, we're thinking, what is going on? Do we walk them over? What are we doing? But even then, it was that representation piece, right? Of having someone that looks like them, that talks like them, that's able to connect with them and build that rapport. There wasn't that at that time when the program came to be. And it goes back to that rapport again. One of the biggest things in supporting our students and the community is to make sure that there is trust and we're building that rapport. We cannot go up to a student in the community and be like, this is what you need to do. This is what you do your freshman year, your sophomore year. It's never a one-time transactional thing. And when we're providing a service to our community and our students, it has to be ongoing, and we have to continuously build on that rapport and creating a community.
There are actually a couple of questions that came in. So, you had mentioned that getting information or fostering an environment that encourages students or clients to access the services. So the first question is, what are some strategies that you use to get information to them? And the second question is related to that. It said, in your program, you stated you never expect Latinx students to come directly to you. Do you think this is something that transfers then to the Latinx professional in the workplace who might need career assistance? And if so, how would you suggest we connect with them? So based on your experience, do you have suggestions as far as, here's the information and getting it to them, or being able to just connect once they're in the workplace?
Mhm. So to answer the first question, Laura, strategies on getting information to them. We understand that our clients are bombarded, our students are bombarded with emails and communication. However, it goes back to that report. If the communication is coming from someone that they are familiar with and they have that trust, then that email is going to be opened. We do a lot of social media campaigning. We know from research that the Latinx community is heavy on social media. I believe, and I don't even want to throw some numbers out there but there's resources. I'm always go back to the resource page. There's a report that kind of just summarizes the consumer intake of Latinx and Latinos as a whole. And a lot of the marketing that we do in sharing information to the students and clients is through social media. And of course, that face-to-face, in-person or virtual meeting. And then to your other question, and not expecting students to come to us, I I don't want to generalize in terms of if it translates to the Latinx professional workplace. But we do find in working with employers that sometimes our students, and the other thing when we're connecting with students and we do surveys, right? And we have the employers do some student assessments, and we have found that one of the biggest things that our students are not doing when they begin an internship or the client or in their first professional workplace is that they do not speak up. They do not communicate. They do not have that. There is no trust. So we find that our employers are having to do that extra reach to connect with them and build that rapport. So based on what we have seen, of course, this is only my experience. I don't want to generalize. We do see that oh, that's my puppy again. I'm sorry. We do see that is translating into the workforce. So again, reaching out, building that rapport, making sure, and that goes back, making sure that they feel that they have what they need to be successful.
I wonder if I know that the next slide, I didn't know if you wanted to move just as that bridge between the employer relations and then talking about the strengths that that the group has, because I know in the past, as we've talked in preparation, but in previous career cafes, one of the questions has been, okay, yes, it's important for us to identify challenges. So we've identified that sometimes building trust or getting information to them can be a challenge, but there was also that emphasis on let's advise based on strengths versus deficits. And so I was really happy to see, if you don't mind, the next slide in terms of the great benefits of the population that you've come to see, and also in terms of employer relations, those things for them to be mindful of, and also those how those are also benefits.
Lauren, if we can go back one
Yes,
slide,
absolutely.
I know I had,
Yeah.
So we have the employer relations information on here. And if you don't mind me kind of just stepping away really quickly so I can okay, I'm so sorry.
That is fine. Sam had shared with me previously that it's a puppy, pretty brand new. So I almost feel like we know each other as we've been meeting prior to this. But definitely this is a good time if these are bringing up questions for you and thoughts, pop them into the chat. We're happy to answer them now or at the end of the presentation. And we have just a couple more slides. I know, time-wise, we kind of wrap the formal presentation about 11:30, but of course, keep it open for some questions for you. So welcome back.
Thank you, Laura. My apologies for that. As Laura
No
mentioned,
problem.
he is a puppy and we are learning together. But if you don't mind me kind of just jumping on back, Laura, and speaking about the employer relations is one of the things that we're also doing, because yes, if we're looking at positive outcomes, right, what are we doing as a whole to support the students is we're really one of our jobs is really connecting with the employees and building that relationship. Our students will not fit your typical recruitment or what the ideal student should look like in terms of paperwork, right? They may use different language that is not common to the workforce. So we really sit down with employers and we discuss recruitment efforts, and we understand that recruitment efforts need to shift, going back to building the rapport. What are employers doing to connect directly to the student? And that is one thing that we focus on, right? If you really want to engage with the community, let's connect, come to us. The other thing is, in that communication, we talk about awareness of the composition and the population, right? Recruiters need to be aware of who the students are, who the clients are, and advocacy, right? Making sure that we're advocating for our students and clients as a whole. And understanding bias. We always talk about this, right? Understanding bias in recruitment efforts and hiring practices, in making sure that we are not imposing our bias onto the recruitment efforts and hiring practices of the employers, which is something, these are very not they're conversations that need to happen when we're working with employers. And I think we've been extremely lucky to just encounter employers that are here, that want to do amazing work, that are here to service the community, and they're on board, and we do what we have to do in order to get students on board into their corporations and company, and they really work on bringing that inclusivity piece to the corporation.
A question on this is, do you have an example or two of specific recruitment strategies you teach to employers, or changes that you advise they might make in their practices?
Mm-hmm. So one of the strategies that we have employers do is we have built a network where we not necessarily bypass everything else that they're doing on campus, but we are creating very intimate spaces where employers can come and meet directly with the students to build that rapport. And it's always very, and we have learned that it's not to make it business professional. Our students need to build community in that sense, and we put on these workshops that are led by employers, and it's in a very casual setting. So that is one. And employers try to bring as much Latino and Hispanic representation to the events. That is key when building this community. So representation. The second part to your question was, what changes do they need to make in their practices? Okay, so when we're talking about shift in recruitment efforts, is again meeting directly with the students, and a lot of employers, their companies and corporations have lines of students, particularly at MSU, right, in a career fair. I mean, you have this. I know people that have waited an hour in a line just to communicate with an employer, and we know that our students don't show up to the career fairs. We do have some. We're doing a push to get them to show up. However, we understand that the Latino and Hispanic community is not showing up. So a shift in that, the recruiters we need to connect directly with them and connect them to the students on a very intimate level again.
Thank
and
you.
that has seemed to work.
And Tristan had echoed, I love breaking down that barrier of business professional attire. It's incredibly exclusionary.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to move to the next slide?
Yes, please, Laura.
Okay.
I know I'm talking and but my apologies. But going
No, this is wonderful.
Perfect, perfect. Going into like the culture, and we've been talking about this, right? Providing a direct service to Latinos and Hispanics. Family and community is extremely important. One thing that we're constantly working on is building a community. And one thing that I did not mention is that when we're providing direct service to the student and the client, we are, it's not a one person's job, right? It's not my job only. We as a department at MSU, and Luis, who wasn't able to be here, has, when we created this program to service the student and our clients, it was meant so that everyone is involved. Even if the direct program is not involved with your program, we have associate directors and directors that are communicating with the community and the clients, and they're sharing, right? They say, hey Sam, I connected with the student, this is what they're looking for, what can you do to help them? Okay, bring the student on board. So it's a collective uh, working uh, job of everyone, right? Working thing to make sure that the students are being serviced to the best of our ability. And going back to the family, when we're looking at employers hiring on Latinos and Hispanics, family is extremely important. We have a lot of Latinos and Hispanic of the population working in service industries, so in the service industry, so maybe they don't get to see the or reap the benefits of being at a higher level, at a management level position. So we need to, when we're working with Latinos and the Hispanic population, I think we need to be sensitive to the family component. And we have, which is extremely important. Now move on to the respect, right? Respect is so important. If we're looking at considering how the Latino and Hispanic population do or manage their work, respect is first. A very professional loyalty. There is a sense of loyalty with embedded into the community, and of course an outstanding work ethic. And I think it's important to share these because we know that more than 3 out of the 4 of Hispanics and Latinos repress who they really are in the workforce. And in doing so, that's how Latinos and Hispanics are moving up in the in the chain of or just getting promoted.
I know
But
one
any
of the
questions?
things
Mhm.
I know one of the things that, thank you for that. I know one of the things that you mentioned is it says here the communication style that related to culture. You had said when we think about it's a collaborative approach, so it's those who are it's the employer side practitioners, you know, the any sort of career service professional. But then on the individual level, the self advocacy is important. And you were sharing with me one of those challenges is that culturally it can go against those values, that the values of humility, and you shouldn't, you know, go on about yourself. And did you want to kind of add a little bit
Totally.
about how important that is if when we consider the individual?
Thank you, Laura, and thank you so much for bringing that up because that is so important. We have so culturally, we have a lot of students and clients struggling with an elevator pitch, and I know this is common across everyone, right? How can we talk about ourselves? I'm not going to brag. However, it is culturally, it is embedded into our community that if we are to talk about ourselves, if we are to even approach it in a way where we are sharing a quality that we have or something great that we did or have done, it's seen as bragging. And I know I know, right? But this, going back to what you said, Laura, it counters an elevator pitch. It counters your ability to pitch a client. It counters your ability to really hit it out of the park with an interview. How can we talk about ourselves without not bragging? And this is something that we're constantly working with our students and clients and breaking that barrier, undoing, not necessarily undoing, but helping them understand the importance of being able to communicate that, which we're working on it.
Have you found particular ways of explaining that difference to be more helpful, or kind of just that shift of, I know that you're feeling this way, this is the importance, Have you found some sort of piece of that conversation that tends to be a little more helpful?
I think sharing, and we've talked about this amongst our colleagues, and it's sharing our personal story with them, right? Sharing shared experiences, being able to connect with them on that level has been extremely important. And again, it goes back to representation, right? Who is the student or client communicating with? Can they talk and discuss about the cultural understandings that may be a barrier in order to move forward, or even express and share their work and their strengths?
Do you think it might be valuable? So if somebody isn't in a position where they feel, they might be a great representation themselves, do you think a possible approach could be something about, asking them to tell you about their values and how they feel about, kind of selling themselves in the workplace? So at least opening it up so perhaps that person can disclose, like, this is actually very awkward, and share more about their culture, like as
Absolutely.
kind of a bridge there.
Yeah, absolutely, Laura. And I think I skipped a little. That's definitely what happens first. We have that communication. I would advise everyone, if you are working with a Latino or a Hispanic client or student, that is the first step, right? Let me help. Can you help me understand, or can you tell me a little bit more about why this is? And truly understanding and building that rapport and building that trust with the client.
Okay,
Yeah, that was
wonderful.
perfect, Laura.
Well, it's hard, right, when you have conversations prior to, and then you get in, it's like, oh, what was the one that we talked about?
Yeah.
So I know that we're kind of running down on our time, but this is actually the last slide that we have before the slide of with our resources. And again, you'll be able to find the slides on our website. We also have a Google Doc that we can share out to the attendees, that we've been populating it with information. We had hoped to maybe even provide some examples of companies or organizations who are doing are kind of improving their practices around some of these things that we've mentioned. So we'll continue to add to that. But really, this has been such a valuable conversation. Definitely have learned a lot in terms of how to improve our understanding as those who are supporting the population, the importance of, from our perspective, being able to help better educate employers and advocate. And did you have any kind of final thoughts you wanted to add before opening it up?
On my end, I think even on the slideshow, just being aware of the culture, and encouraging people to just be inclusive, right? And if you have an opportunity to kind of just get some training on it, I would really encourage everyone to do so. And lastly, the representation component is so important, and it goes back to the cultural values, the community, and how we can connect and provide a direct service to everyone as a whole. Mhm.
Great, thank you. So here you can see a ton of great resources. Definitely encourage you to read more about them. I'm actually not seeing any questions in the chat. I'll just stop the share now at this point. Any questions before we close it out?
I do have a question. I am a high school counselor, and I have about 30% of my students are Latina or Latino or Hispanic. I'm still learning the correct phrasing on that. But from a high school perspective, like, do you have any suggestions or things I could focus on with my students to get them either exposure to future careers, or I guess like strategies to kind of start thinking about like those next steps?
Mhm. Yes, thank you so much for your question. And actually, Laura and I briefly touched on K through 12 prior to jumping on board. And exposure is definitely key, I would say. before coming on to this, I did work with K through 12 students, particularly 6 through 12, and bringing career exposure to students. And with our middle schoolers, I remember, and I was working out in Texas in the Rio Grande Valley, servicing predominantly Latino and Hispanic students of low economic backgrounds and first generation. The biggest thing was to make exposure for middle schoolers fun. Making it fun, building on games. And there's a lot of things to do out there, but just being fun, making a career development fun, doing some job interviewings, even some mock interviews with middle schoolers was probably the funnest thing that we have ever done. And no one truly understood what an interview was until we got to that point. No one knew what kind of jobs you can do, what college even was. And that is really where we started. And as for our high schoolers, particularly with our seniors in our graduating class, it was making sure that they are aware of all the opportunities that they have in a college setting in all the majors. A lot of the times we found that students were not aware of the 100 or 200 majors that were listed, right? And what can you do with each one? Or let's pick 10 that you are considering and let's explore each one. And it was a lot of work, but it had to be done. If that helps and answers your question. There's a lot of personal communications that or contact and communication that we have to have with each student.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. I really appreciate that everybody has stayed on. And again, this recording and all of the resources will be available on our website, MichCDA.org. And remember, our conference is coming up next month. But I just wanted to thank Sam so very much and for presenting this wonderful information that is very much needed. And also thank you to board members and our attendees. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for having me as well.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much, Samantha and Laura.
Yeah, it was really, really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.